never know what darkness might be festering inside of the ones closest to you. A perfect example of this would be the Legion, a merciless band of killers who are now at the hands of the entity. Come with me as I guide you down the dark and corrupted path that is the Legion. Frank Morrison was 19 and had little to show for it. He'd stopped attending school after being kicked out of the basketball team for shoving a referee into the stands. Yet Frank was a man of potential who could light up a room despite his bleak childhood. At 6 years old, he'd been taken away from Calgary to start a circuit of foster homes. No matter how many times he'd lashed out, threw tantrums, and got into fights, they'd kept moving him to new, unfamiliar houses. His last move had been 3 years prior, when his last foster dad, Clive Andrews, had picked him up from the adoption center. They'd been on the road for 7 hours before reaching a small bungalow in Ormond. It would be the longest time they'd spend together. Clive was too busy trading checks from family services for drinks at the bar. Ormond was a small, stale place, a remote town of 6,000 inhabitants where gray winters drag on for most of the year. Frank did everything he could to get into another adoptive family, but he changed his mind when he caught the attention of Julie, a beautiful girl who was convinced that she deserved better than a life in Ormond, and Frank, as an outsider, was her ticket out. Frank attended the parties she threw, where everyone was younger than him and easily impressed, which he liked. He met the impulsive Joey, who liked to show off, and the shy, naive Susie, who was Julie's best friend. They would hang out at an abandoned lodge up Mount Ormond. Their time together was the perfect break from the boring conformity of their small, insignificant, everyday lives. Frank saw it as an opportunity to shape their lack of experience into something powerful. He lined up nights of debauchery and rampage, testing their limits. Bullying, vandalism, and theft were essentially their weekend plans. It came to a point where they would do anything he asked. Nothing was off limits when they put their masks on. One evening, Frank dared Joey to vandalize the store that had recently fired him. They snuck inside easily enough, as the building was supposed to be empty after closing hours. But a cleaner who was still there grabbed Julie as soon as she came near. Hearing her stifled cries, a dark impulse took over Frank. He rushed to her aid, knife in hand, and without hesitating, planted the blade into the cleaner's back. As the group stared at Frank in shock, he ordered them to finish the job. Joey clenched his jaw, grabbed the knife, and stabbed the bleeding man in the ribs. Susie didn't want to do it. Frank shouted at her. They had to finish what they'd started. Julie closed her eyes and slid the knife into the man's chest. She handed the wet blade to Susie. They were all in this together now. Susie stared at Julie in disbelief as Frank grabbed her trembling hands and inserted the knife deep into the man's throat. Frank told them to move fast. They mopped the blood off the floor, stashed the body in the trunk of Joey's car, and drove up Mount Ormond. All four were digging in the muddy snow to dispose of the body when Frank spotted something moving through the woods. He grabbed his knife and broke from the group to check it out. The fog thickened around Frank, becoming so dense that he soon could no longer see ahead. He retraced his steps and stumbled onto an ominous trail. He followed the eerie path as if called by the darkness. Julie, Susie, and Joey finished digging, but Frank was nowhere to be seen. Julie spotted his muddy footsteps in the snow, and the three of them followed the trail, which took them deeper into the woods. Once the Legion had established that Frank was in charge, they agreed that they would follow him through hell if he asked them to. There is a big possibility that the figure that Frank had seen and followed in those woods was none other than Benedict Baker himself. It has been a while since we have heard from Baker, but we will get into that at a later date. The Legion is different from most killers in the entity's realm, as they are more than happy to hunt and slaughter anyone that crosses their path. They find joy in seeing their victims suffer. If you compare the Legion to most other killers in the entity's realm, you will notice that they look the most like their former selves. This is because the entity did not have to torture them to get what it wanted. Frank stood in front of the entity proudly, agreeing to the entity's terms on behalf of his entire posse. Frank and his gang are only after one thing, and that is to feed their own ego, Frank especially. They originally wanted to spread their name across the entire world, but after meeting the entity, Frank has much bigger plans. They will rise to the top of this little game that they are playing, and they will spill the blood of whoever gets in their path. The Legion is a very agile killer, and will not be stopped by any obstacle that gets in their way. Dropped pallets and windows will not stop them from closing in. Their main objective in every trial is to make sure that every survivor has the chance to feel the sharp, cold sting that is the edge of their blade. The Legion does not focus on one survivor in each trial. After they locate the first survivor and inflict a deep wound, they immediately look around and can instinctively see and hear the racing hearts of any other survivor in the area. Once they injure most, if not all, of the survivors, it is time to give the entity its sustenance. Once they have located an injured survivor and brought them to a dying state, they must carry them to a hook to begin the sacrifice. During this time, the Legion has a strong advantage over most other killers. If another survivor tries to get in the way of the sacrifice, Legion can swing their blade and attack said survivor as many times as they want, without any slowdown or penalty to movement while they are carrying the downed survivor. When they finally hook the survivor and start the sacrifice, it is in the other survivor's best interest to run and hide. Some might choose to take refuge in a nearby locker. After a while, they might believe that it is safe to exit the locker and continue their trial, but they would be wrong. The Legion has a very unique ability to induce fear from a long distance. When a survivor exits a locker, they are overwhelmed with fear and let out a blood-curdling scream. This immediately gives away their position, telling the Legion where their next victim is. The Legion's final unique ability takes advantage of the survivor's teamwork. Once 2 or more survivors start repairing a generator together, the Legion can instantly spot said generator. This, in turn, forces the survivors to split up, making it that much more difficult for the survivors to heal their deep wounds and stop the bleeding. This ability makes it very difficult for the survivors to finish repairing the generators they need to open the exit gates, giving the Legion plenty of time to toy with their victims before finally giving the entity what it needs. The Legion and Ghostface love to be paired together for a hunt. Frank, Susie, Joey, and Julie love making personalized mixtapes for their hunts. This goes over well with Ghostface, as he loves to take shameless selfies with his victims as they take their last dying breath. On the other side, Nia Carlson is the Legion's favorite prey. Nia is cocky and loves to leave her mark wherever she goes, much like the Legion. Some think Nia secretly admires them and loves their work. Who knows, after the entity drains a soul repeatedly, trial after trial, anything is possible. In closing, the Legion is a very formidable killer in the realm of the entity. They are fast, brutal, and shameless. If you find yourself lost in the woods next to a campfire, run, and don't look back. The only thing waiting for you will be death, which we all know is not an escape.